You're going to hear a little bit of noise in the background because somebody is mowing their lawn. I'm out in the sukkah, which is where we do things these days. So you might hear a little background noise. So what are we talking about this morning or this afternoon? Any particular topic?
Yes, Rabbi. It was, I believe it was Simcha in the Sukkah, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just tell you in 1 second. Secret of the Sukkah and its life's lessons.
Okay. Sukkah comes immediately after Yom Kippur. In the days following Yom Kippur, since we have all been forgiven and we have a clean slate, it means that we are all equal, equally innocent. So we're starting off from the same starting point as innocent and ready to do mitzvahs. And so God gives us the holiday of Sukkot. One of the things that the Sukkah represents is unity. Every Jew can sit and fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah in the same Sukkah with every other Jew. So first of all, it's a mitzvah that can be done as a group. Like you can't put on the same pair of tefillin on two people at the same time. Two people can't eat the same piece of matzah. These are individual mitzvahs. All people can hear the blowing of the shofar. If you have one shofar loud enough, you can have the entire Jewish population of the world fulfill the mitzvah by hearing the same sound of the shofar at the same time. But that only involves hearing. One function in one part of the body. With a sukkah, it's the entire body. So the entire body and the entire people, the nation, can fulfill the mitzvah at the same time with one mitzvah, one sukkah, if it's big enough. And the reason for these two things, that the entire body can do the mitzvah and that we can do it all together, is because of our clean slate, the innocence with which we come to the mitzvah, so that every part of the body is worthy of doing a mitzvah, and the entire Jewish people are equally innocent and can fulfill the mitzvah together. So all distinctions are removed. A tzaddik sitting in a sukkah isn't doing a bigger mitzvah than a bar mitzvah boy sitting in a sukkah. They're completely equal. And it's the entire body. There is one other mitzvah that you can fulfill with your entire body, and that is mikvah. In fact, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of mikvah, it's got to cover your entire body. You have to be completely immersed in the water. But here again, the sukkah has one ingredient more, and that is you can come into the sukkah with your boots on. Even your boots can come into the sukkah. So not only the entire body, but the garments of the body, the shoes and the boots, are also included in the mitzvah. And that's represented also by the fact that you eat and sleep in the sukkah. Chabad doesn't have the custom of sleeping in the sukkah. But eating, meaning not only is the body innocent, but even your your physical earthly activities have taken on a sanctity and a holiness. Eating in the sukkah is a mitzvah. Sleeping in the sukkah is a mitzvah. Anything you do in a sukkah is a mitzvah. In fact, when the Rebbe would speak to Chassidim during Sukkot, there wasn't a sukkah big enough for everyone to gather safely. And so the Rebbe would speak in the shul, in the hall, but he wouldn't sit down. Because during the 8 days or 7 days of Sukkot, we sit in a sukkah. The Rebbe wouldn't sit outside the sukkah. So not only the body, not only the people or the nation, but even the activities, the externals, the garments, the boots, the eating has become holy. Now, what that represents on a deeper level is that the sukkah is actually a divine embrace. God gives us a mitzvah that embraces us, envelops us in his holiness. One of the reasons we don't sleep in a sukkah is because it's too holy to allow you a good night's rest. How can you sleep in such a holy place? The holiness of it is God enveloping us with in his arms, in his presence. And again, as a result of the innocence that we have attained on Yom Kippur. But here is a much deeper insight into both Yom Kippur and Sukkot. The mitzvah of Sukkah is to rejoice. The days of Sukkot are known as Zman Simchasenu. It is the anniversary of all joy for the year. It's like the Rosh Hashanah of joy. Everything has its origin. The origin of joy comes from this holiday. And it lasts for a year. Next year we'll have Sukkot again. In the same way, like forgiveness, the anniversary or the Rosh Hashanah for forgiveness is Yom Kippur. And it lasts for a year. Next Yom Kippur will have to be forgiven again. So the innocence that we have on Yom Kippur needs to last a year until next Yom Kippur. And the joy that we experience on Sukkot or Simchat Torah has to last the whole year until next year, Sukkot or Simchat Torah. Here's the question, a very practical question. How is it that the joy, the emotion, the mood of a human being can be so significant in God's eyes? I can understand if we're doing a mitzvah, it's a divine decree, it's a divine commandment to do a mitzvah. So even though it's a human being who's doing the mitzvah, but the mitzvah itself is divine. So I can understand how it could be significant to God when a Jew lights a Shabbos candle or gives challah or goes to the mikveh or eats in the sukkah, because it's a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah. But how is it that my mood, my feeling, my emotion, so human, so limited, how can that be significant to God? Same question about Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, I regret my sin. I ask for forgiveness. But how can a human emotion like regret, how could it possibly be significant to an infinite God? I mean, we know how shallow our feelings can be. We know how fickle they are. So let's say I'm sitting in the sukkah and I'm really trying to fulfill the mood of the holiday to be besimcha, to be happy. And I succeed and I am happy. And then I hear some news about something frivolous and petty, and all of a sudden my happiness is gone. Now I'm in a bad mood. And with my regret, yes, I feel regret. But how deep, how strong, how big is my regret? It's tiny. How could it possibly be significant to an infinite God? It's a very real question. So usually the answer is, you see, that's what makes it so exciting and so great. That God in his infinity can find your feeling precious. As frivolous as it is, as fickle as it is, as fragile as it is, as temporary as it is, it's meaningful to him because he is so infinite, he can find even something so tiny as a human feeling, he can find it significant. But the correct answer is, when God asks us to be happy, it's not arbitrary. Today I want you to be happy. Or on Yom Kippur, today I want you to be regretting. On Pesach, I want you to feel liberated. It's not arbitrary. Feel this or feel that. Every mitzvah is actually joining God in the performance of that mitzvah. God keeps all the mitzvahs that he asks us to keep. In fact, he does it first, and then he asks us to keep it with him, like the classical example of Shabbat. God created the world in 6 days, and he rests on the seventh. And so he asks us to rest with him. So by keeping Shabbat, we're actually joining God's observance of Shabbat. We're on the same page with him. He is observing Shabbat and we observe it with him. It's like your grandfather is sitting at the Shabbos table singing a Shabbos song and you don't want to sit at the table. It's not just that you're not singing the song or observing Shabbat. You're not on the same page with your grandfather. That's the inner soul of the mitzvah. The inner soul of every mitzvah is, are you on the same page with God? Are you staying with him? When he rests, do you rest with him? During the 6 days when he's busy creating and perfecting the world, are you doing anything to perfect the world? We should always be in touch with God. Whatever God is doing, we should be participating. That's mitzvah, every mitzvah. So when God says today you should be happy. What he's telling us is that today he is happy. On Yom Kippur, and this is really important to know, God is regretting. God is doing tshuva. And that's why he says today would be a good day for you to do tshuva. Because when we do it together, it is really powerful. So now all of a sudden, my regretting my tshuva on Yom Kippur is not tiny. It's a little piece, but it's a little piece of a huge regret, which is infinite, God's regret. So on Yom Kippur, God regrets sin. He regrets creating sin. He regrets giving us an evil inclination, a yetzer hara. He regrets the fact that our godly soul was sent from heaven down into this world, into a physical body, where it has to be exposed or subjected to sin. He regrets it all. Of course, there's a good reason, a very compelling reason. This must happen. Evil must be eradicated, and the only way to eradicate it is to be exposed to it. So yes, it has to happen, but he doesn't like it. He is uncomfortable all year with the fact that the godly soul is exposed to unholiness, that Jews are in exile, that we have an evil inclination within us. He regrets it terribly. But the anniversary of that regret is Yom Kippur. Actually, what happened the first Yom Kippur? The first Yom Kippur was 40 days after the Jews made the golden calf. And on that day, God said, I forgive you. 40 days after they made the golden calf. So God chose a day and said, I have to forgive them. Why? Because I did this to them. I made sin possible. I gave them that temptation to do forbidden things. How can I not forgive them when I did this to them? So again, I did it for a very good reason. But still, it's like a king who sends his army to war. He has to. You have to protect the kingdom. But does he enjoy it? Does he like it? He's sending his own people, his own children, to a dangerous place. He hates it. So when they come home, he is so thrilled. In the same way, when we come to Yom Kippur, after a whole year of being exposed to unholiness, and we ask for forgiveness, God is so thrilled that of course he forgives us, because he regrets the whole thing more than we do. So now imagine how your little bit of regret joined with his infinite regret, how powerful that is, and how powerful the effect of weakening all the evil in the world. Because every time you regret a sin, you weaken it. You take some of its power away. You bring out some of its godly potential. So, here's a good example. One of my sons is a singer. He's a Hasidic singer. and he does concerts. He was born in Minnesota, where I've been living for 50 years. He was born in Minnesota. So when he gets up on stage, he tells the story, makes this joke. He says, you know, I'm not the only Jewish singer who comes from Minnesota. There's another Jewish singer, Bob Dylan, comes from Minnesota. He says, so there are two Jewish boys from Minnesota who are singers. And between the two of us, we have sold millions of albums. So the few albums that he has sold seem puny and insignificant, but together with Dylan's albums, oh, we have sold millions together. So when you join God's regret, or on Sukkot, when you join God's joy, that's a whole different story. So that really is the secret of the Sukkah. It's an embrace. God says, now that we've cleaned the slate, now that we've gotten past the regrets, and we're going to have a year of innocence, now I can hug you. Now everything you do is wonderful. Even your eating, even your sleeping. Now it's all within my presence. And Kabbalah points out that there's a similarity between the Sukkah and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur was the only day of the year in which the Kohen Gadol would go into the Holy of Holies, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And what did he do there? Yes, he said a short prayer, a 2-minute prayer, but he also brought the pan, the frying pan, with the incense and the smoke and the aroma, the fragrance of the incense filled the entire Holy of Holies. It created a cloud, a fragrant cloud. The schach that we put on top of our sukkah is similar. A holy presence that covers us, like cloud cover. In other words, it surrounds us. So the similarity in the service of the two holidays. On Yom Kippur, we had the cloud that surrounded the Kohen Gadol. And on Sukkot, we have the schach, which is the essence of the Sukkah. The walls are not that holy, but the schach is. So the theme of it is the embrace. The Sukkah embraces us like the cloud of incense smoke that embraced the Kohen Gadol, who was representing the entire Jewish people, not only in his presence, but also in his prayer on behalf of the people. So again, there is that theme of the embrace, to be enveloped in holiness, to be enveloped in God's presence, to be enveloped in God's pleasure. Now this joy has to last the whole year. And the Arizal taught that being happy is in and of itself a mitzvah. Because the Torah says, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. You should serve God with joy. And the conventional understanding is that when you're serving God, meaning when you're doing a mitzvah, you should do it with joy, which is understandable and reasonable. If you're doing God a favor, don't do it with a sour disposition. You do someone a favor, you do it happily. That's reasonable. The Ari said, it's not when you're serving God, you should do it with joy. Ivdu es Hashem, if you want to serve God, besimcha, do it by being happy. You are serving God simply by being happy. How so? God created you. God included you in his vast eternal plan. You are a necessary part of God's purpose for creation. Why wouldn't you be happy? Or in very simple terms, you're a guest in God's house. Isn't that reason to be happy? And if you have a guest in your house and the guest is so happy to be your guest, wouldn't you invite him back again? Whereas if you have a guest in your house and they're miserable and sour, would you invite them back again? So being happy just to be part of God's people, just to be part of God's plan, that serves God. Meaning, that puts you on the same page with him because he is so happy to have you be part of his vast eternal plan. So by being happy, you're joining his happiness. And that's why if you're not happy, it is such an uncomfortable, like an instrument that is off tune in an orchestra. A sour note. God is happy to have you there and you're not. That doesn't make for a beautiful sound. So why do we need to be happy? If God is happy to have you, then by being happy to be part of his plan, you're imitating him. You're on the same page with him. One final thought. Using the analogy of the grandfather who's sitting at the Shabbos table or at the Yom Tov table or in the Sukkah, enjoying the Yom Tov. But his grandson doesn't want to come into the Sukkah. They're not on the same page. What really is it that the grandfather misses? What pains him? It could be it pains him that his grandchild is not observing. Pains him the grandchild is not celebrating Yom Tov, is not fulfilling the mitzvah of Sukkah. It pains him that his grandson is not committed to Judaism, to mitzvot. Or it pains him that he is doing this without his grandson. In other words, it's his grandson that he misses. Not the mitzvah. Because the mitzvah is the grandson's obligation. The grandson is already bar mitzvah or an adult. So it's the grandson's mitzvah, not the grandfather's. So what does the grandfather miss? He misses his grandson. They're not on the same page. Now, interestingly, imagine the grandfather has many grandsons. And they're all sitting there in the sukkah with him. only one isn't coming into the sukkah. Does he miss that one? He's got all the others. He misses that one. So it's not like if you don't do the mitzvah, then God forgets about you, because he has plenty of Jews doing mitzvahs for him. The one that doesn't do the mitzvah, that's the one he misses the most. That's the one he needs the most. And that's why it is such a huge mitzvah to get another Jew to join you in a sukkah, or to join you in shaking the lulav and etrog, or any other mitzvah. So the children, the grandchildren who are sitting at the grandfather's table, enjoying the Yom Tov, they should all feel terrible for the grandfather who is aching over the grandchild who doesn't come to the table. And we should do everything we can to get that grandchild to come to the table as well. Not only for the sake of the grandchild, but for the sake of the grandfather. That's actually what the lulav and esrog represent, the oneness of the people. That every kind of Jew, whether with a good taste or not, with a good fragrance or not, even the arava, even the willow that doesn't have a good taste and it doesn't have a good smell, needs to be part of the mitzvah. Otherwise, no one is doing the mitzvah correctly. Without the arava, the set is not complete. And on a lighter note, this year, the willow that has no smell and no taste is the most prominent, because what else has no smell and no taste? Those are the symptoms of corona. You don't smell and you don't taste. So let's include every Jew we can think of. Invite him to shake a lulav and esrog, because without that Jew, without the arava, without the willow, none of us are doing the mitzvah correctly. Let's invite him to be joyous, to enjoy being a Jew, to enjoy being part of God's plan, to enjoy being part of God's incredible people. Just for that alone, we should be happy every day of the year. So a very, very happy Yom Tov to all of us. A very joyous Simchas Torah that we're coming up very soon, where, again, we rejoice with the Torah because the Torah is rejoicing with us, and we have to reciprocate. So our joy joined with the Torah's joy, because, you know, what would the Torah be without us? Of course, it's true. What would we be without the Torah? That's true. So the Torah gives us our significance. That makes sense that we rejoice with the Torah. Look what the Torah does for us. But why would the Torah rejoice with our singing or with our dancing? What are we doing for the Torah? And the answer is, what would the Torah be without us? Without a Jewish people, there would be no Torah, because there'd be no one to give it to. There would be no one so devoted, so committed, despite all odds. in the most difficult, the most trying of times, we never abandoned the Torah. So the Torah is thrilled to have been given to us. And we are thrilled for having received it. That is Simchas Torah. I want to end with an incredible little medrash. It's really something to think about and to rejoice. We all know the story. Moshe goes up to the mountain to receive the Luchot, to receive the Ten Commandments. While he is there on the mountain talking to God himself, God said to him, "You need to go down because your people did a terrible thing. They made a graven image. They're worshiping a graven image." Moshe comes down off the mountain, carrying the Ten Commandments. He sees the golden calf and the Jews dancing around the golden calf. He throws the luchos down and he breaks them. And God thanks him. Because by breaking the tablets of the Ten Commandments, actually they weren't tablets. They were squares. It wasn't a flat piece of stone. It was a square, a cube of marble, 2 cubes. But he broke them because they represented the contract between God and his people, in which it said, "You will have no other gods." So by breaking the luchos, he canceled the contract, so that God can't be very angry at the people because we never completed the deal. So it protected the Jews from the punishment that they would otherwise. So God thanked Moshe for being so thoughtful and canceling the contract. Now the Medrash asks the obvious question. Why did Moshe bring the tablets down from heaven at all? He should have said to God, in that case, I'm not taking the tablets. It's the contract, but I'm not accepting it. Why bring it down to the people and then break it? Don't bring it down. Leave it in heaven. Listen to what the Medrash says. It's mind-boggling. And the Medrash says it so matter-of-factly, so innocently, so casually. The Medrash says Moshe carried the stones down from the mountain because he did not believe that his people would do such a thing. That's it. That's the whole Medrash. And we are left to marvel. He didn't believe? Who told him that they had made a graven image? God himself. And Moshe didn't believe it. He didn't believe it. Can you believe this? Moshe didn't believe God. What kind of love, what kind of devotion to his difficult, stiff-necked people did Moshe have? He simply could not believe that they would do such a thing. Even when God himself testifies that that's what they did. Now, there's a halachic explanation. The halachic explanation is a judge may not come to a conclusion on hearsay. You have to have witnesses. God said they did it, but God can't be a witness. A witness has to be human, halachically. So God said, but halachically, that's not the ruling. Until he saw it himself, then there was no more room for leniency, so he broke the tablets. That's the halachic dimension of it. On a higher level, you might say, he didn't question God, but he had an option. He could either understand what God said literally or in a more figurative sense. God said they made a graven image. And Moshe's immediate reaction was, you mean on some very subtle level they may have some doubts about you? That doesn't disqualify them from receiving the Ten Commandments. So, of course, he believed God. But he assumed that God is speaking on a heavenly level, on some heavenly, subtle place, someplace within their soul. Maybe they were harboring some doubts about God, which could be considered idolatry. But they didn't literally make a golden calf. So when he came down off the mountain and he saw the golden calf, he was shocked. Because until that moment, he did not believe it at all. It wasn't possible in his mind that Jews would do something like that. And that's what God thanked him for being the kind of devoted leader who loves his people beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because you could think, you know how difficult the people were to Moshe? How they tired him with their complaints and with their sins and with their doubts and with their... So you would think, if Moshe was just a regular guy, you would think that when God said they made a golden calf, Moshe's reaction would be, yep, I knew I couldn't trust them for 40 days without me. You would think Moshe would say, another mess up? These people are impossible. Not only didn't he have that reaction, despite everything they had done, it was just the beginning of the 40 years, but already they had complained about no water. They brought with them an idol. At least one of the Jews brought with him an idol from Egypt. Moshe's reaction was, no, not an idol. Maybe they still had some doubts. Yeah, that's possible. But not an actual idol? No. Not the children of Israel. Not the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. No, they would not. That's the kind of leader we need. And that's the kind of love for our fellow Jew that we need. Even when we hear from God himself that the Jews deserve a punishment, we don't believe it. We don't believe it. That's what is expected of us. And not believe it. So particularly, the week after Yom Kippur, no Jew deserves any kind of punishment, God forbid. Every Jew has been forgiven. Every Jew is now busy with a mitzvah. Mitzvah of Sukkah, the mitzvah of Lulav, the mitzvah of rejoicing. So today, every Jew deserves the greatest reward that has ever been invented. Because we're still Jews. Every Jew is still a Jew and wants to be, and even thinks he's a good Jew. because he wants to be a good Jew. He just doesn't know what it takes. So let us celebrate this holiday of togetherness. To think of every Jew the way Moshe thought of Jews. He had the right attitude. But really, isn't that a great medrash? Doesn't that tell you almost everything you need to know about how to go about being a Jew, a member of the Jewish people? It's incredible. Magnificent. Do we have the capacity for questions?
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. Ladies, you can unmute yourself if you have any questions for the Rabbi now. Thank you.
I have a question. Rabbi, going along with the shiur that you gave about Adam and Chava, that Chava understood that they had to come into this physical world and correct and do. Could the golden calf have something like that also, that it had to be for them to do tshuva, to correct?
I like how you're thinking. It is the other sin which we're still fixing. The sin of the eating from the tree, the Eitz Hadas, we're still fixing it. When it gets corrected, Mashiach will be here. The other sin that we're still paying dues,
The golden calf.
we're still paying off the mortgage, is the golden calf. So they do have something in common. I think they're the two sides of unholiness. Eating from the tree of knowledge was barely unholy. It was a tree of knowledge. The result was that we became more like God. We knew good and evil. Only you couldn't be in the Garden of Eden anymore. You had to step into the world of mortality, not the world of sin. Just the world of human beings who need to eat, who need to go to work, who need to make a living. No sin involved. There's pain in childbirth. No sin. It's just becoming really human. That was the result of the eating from the tree. When we correct that, we won't stop sinning. We won't die anymore. We won't have pain anymore. We won't need to go to work anymore.
Sounds nice.
It sounds good, no? But when we made the golden calf, that's when we stepped into the world of sin. It's almost like any sin committed before the giving of the Torah wasn't really a sin because there had been no commandments. So although the act was wrong, all the early idolaters in the time of Noah, of course it was wrong and unholy, but the Torah hadn't been given. The contract hadn't been signed. And so the sin was not as grievous as after the Torah was given. So the first sin committed for real was the golden calf. And that was the ultimate sin. Avodah Zarah. Now we're fixing that. Fixing that means creating a world in which sin is no longer acceptable or even thinkable. That's a hard job. Maybe harder than correcting the results of the tree of knowledge. So two things are going to happen when Mashiach comes. First of all, people will stop sinning.
All people.
All people. There will be no room for other gods. In people's minds and people's hearts, there will be no room for any doubts about God. Because God will be so obvious, so revealed, so visible, that there just won't be any thoughts of other gods. And when there are no other gods, then there's no temptation to
And that
violate.
is good.
So there will be no more sinning. On top of that, all the frailties that a human being is subjected to will also go away.
So there will be almost no choice because everybody will do good because we will see Hashem, and that would be it.
There will, no, evil will no longer be a choice. We will still have the freedom, but evil will not be one of the options.
Okay.
So today, our freedom of choice is between a mitzvah and a sin. But when you take the sin away, you haven't changed me. I still have freedom of choice, but there are no sins around. It is no longer an option. So what will my choices be?
Which mitzvah to do more, where to volunteer, kibbud horim, etc.
Right. And the proof of it is, in the Garden of Eden, before they ate from the tree, did Adam and Chava have freedom of choice? That will be beautiful.
And we look forward to that.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Edie.
It's always bothered me that when in the Torah it introduces being Messiah, being the other meaning, it starts with what? Why doesn't it say and? It's as if Sukkot is something other than anything else. But on Sukkot, I don't know, that word ach bothers me.
Which word?
Ah, but quote, on the 15th day you will do. Why not and? Why but? Like if Sukkot is something other, something different, maybe schizophrenic, I don't know. Why is there this otherness of it? But, is there any explanation of that?
But can mean two things. It can mean however, right?
Yeah.
In other words, there are other options. However, you should be happy. The word but can also mean only.
There's another aspect of Sukkot. It's not.
Like we have nothing to fear but fear alone. So, but would mean only. So, v'hiyisem ach sameach, you should be only happy. But I understand your question. Even if you say only, you're still implying that there is an option.
There's something different, or it's not just a holiday of big sacrifices, it's another thing.
Well, actually, the word ach is also a sound. Besides a word, it is also a sound. It's a groan. It's a krechts. When you're in pain, when you're disappointed, it is expressed in ach. a little Yiddish, not Hebrew, but but it's
Must be
familiar. Huh?
About. What are we talking about? Brilliant.
Right. What are you aching about? So the hidden message, the hidden message is that on this day you should be happy, even if there is cause for ach. In other words, even in Golus, even in difficult times, it's not denying, it's not living in denial. Yeah, make like you're happy and you don't notice all the pain. No, 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 you notice the pain. You know there's an ach, but be happy anyway. Because even the ach is part of a plan. So you can actually increase your happiness because of the presence of the pain.
So you think the word is there to represent pain?
Yeah.
Not
So actually the greatness of our people is that we have been optimistic, we have trusted God, we have rejoiced in the Torah under the most painful conditions. You might even say the more painful, the more optimistic we became.
oh,
We used the pain to increase the joy.
That's a deep level.
Like nothing is
Interesting.
going to stop me from doing this mitzvah. And the harder you try to stop me, the harder I will do the mitzvah.
Well, anybody else with any more questions?
I just want to thank you for all the shiurim I listen to always. So I want to thank you.
You're very
Thank
kind.
you.
You're very welcome. I hope you continue to enjoy them.
We will, Bezrat Hashem.
I'm sure we will, Rabbi. Thank you. Anybody else with any more questions?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to ask if the rabbi can make some comments about the current situation, the moral dilemma.
We can't hear you.
I wanted to ask.
We can't hear you. What happened to your sound?
I unmuted myself.
Well, we hear you, Esther. We hear you.
I wanted to ask if the rabbi can comment about the moral dilemmas facing our society today with the coronavirus.
Okay, Rabbi, the moral dilemmas that our society is facing today with the coronavirus.
The moral dilemma?
Moral dilemmas.
The only moral dilemma I can think of is whether we should go to shul and expose ourselves to other people or not. What other moral dilemma is there? And in fact, God is telling us, by giving us this condition, God is telling us, if you daven alone at home, it will be just as powerful and just as acceptable as if you were davening with a large crowd. Take it as a compliment. When God brought this thing into the world, he knew it meant no minyan. And he said, that's good. I like when people daven privately once in a while. I'd like to remind you that it's your prayer, not the congregational prayer. It's you. It's every individual in the minyan. But, you know, we may have gotten this impression that prayer is effective only when there's a minyan. So God is telling us, no. Okay, one final story. There's a man in New York who lost his wife. They never had children. He was never observant. And now, because of the corona, He is alone in his apartment, literally alone, no family, no one. And Pesach came. He had no idea. The night of Pesach, the night of the first Seder, he suddenly realized, hey, it's Passover. He hadn't thought of it until that moment. And he felt bad that he wasn't going to go anywhere to anybody else's Seder like he would do in the past. He doesn't know how to make a Seder. And he hadn't even bought any matzah. So he went into his pantry and he found rice cakes, round rice cakes. You know, from a distance, if you're a little nearsighted, it could look like a matzah, like a tiny little matzah. He took 3 rice cakes and the wine that he had in the house, and he followed the instructions in the Haggadah that he had inherited from his grandmother. He called me after Yontif, and he said, this is what I did, and I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't think it would have any meaning or significance at all, because I didn't know what I was doing, but it felt like somebody was listening. Isn't that amazing? But here's my point. If I were to ask a secular person, what do you think of the Seder, of the Pesach Seder that this guy made in his apartment? Like he said, it was kind of strange because I was asking myself the 4 questions. Ask a secular person, what do you think of that Seder? Predictably, the person would say, it was totally unnecessary. It was a waste of time. He shouldn't have bothered. What's the point? You're not into the religion. You're not a practicing Jew. You didn't even have matzah in the house, so skip it. If you're in the mood next year and you remember to buy matzah, or you can go to somebody else's Seder, then you'll go. But this is totally unnecessary. What if I asked a very religious person, what do you think of this man's Seder? Predictably, he would say it was blasphemous. He made a mockery of a mitzvah. This is not a Seder. He fulfilled no mitzvah whatsoever. The wine he was drinking probably wasn't even kosher. So it was wrong of him to do it. He should have more. But what if I asked the Baal Shem Tov? If I asked the Baal Shem Tov, what do you think of this man's Seder with the 3 rice cakes? The Baal Shem Tov would probably say, of all the Seders in New York that night, this Seder brought God to tears. You think about it just for a minute. Why did he bother? Why did he bother? Was he trying to impress somebody? Nobody would know whether he did or didn't. Did he feel guilty? He's not observant. He's not religious. He wouldn't feel guilty. But something in his Jewish soul could not make peace with the fact that it was Passover, it was Seder night, and he wasn't doing anything. The Baal Shem Tov is right. Which Seder touched God's heart more? than that one. And no, it was not a mitzvah. Of course not. But the devotion of a Jew to his Jewishness was more visible in this man's efforts than in the perfect execution of a perfect Seder, but without that feeling. So we really are an incredible people. Incomparable. Maybe we shouldn't even be called a people. We are something else. We are a strange phenomenon. And we should celebrate it every day. And the most beautiful thing about the whole story, this guy has no idea that he did anything special. It's so innocent. It's so artless. We are an incredible people.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful Yom Tov.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful Simchas Torah. Enjoy the Sukkah. Enjoy being who we are.
Thank you so much for coming on Drops, Rabbi. We really appreciate it. On behalf of all the ladies, I thank you. And have a wonderful, wonderful rest of Sukkot and Simchas Torah. And ladies, just before we go, I just want to tell you next week, our guest speaker will be Rabbi Shaul Rosenblatt, the founder of Asia Torah UK. So look forward to seeing you all next week. And Rabbi, thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nyashakawa.
So much.
Thank you.
Only
so
good
much.
news.
Joyce.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
so
A
amazing.
year of good news for everybody.
Sameach.
Amen. Sameach.
You're welcome in Ramat Bet Shemesh whenever you come.
Thank you, thank you.
Bezrat Hashem, after Corona, in a real meeting.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be so special. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chag
Bye.
Sameach.
Bye.
Chag Sameach.
Joyce.
Bye.
Hi, Rosalind.
Thank you so much, Joyce. It was amazing.
Joyce, thanks a million.
Pleasure, ladies. Look forward to
Joyce. Lovely.
Thank you so much, Joyce.
Thank you,
Fantastic.
Joyce.
That was absolutely fantastic.
Bye.
Thank you for including me. I appreciate it.
Please send me your details, okay?
I did.
Okay, Gold Direct.
Goal, GOALDIRECTED @yahoo.com.
Got it. Okay, I'll enter you. Thank you.
Oh, okay, yay, she left the room. It's good to see everyone.
Bye, everybody. Hag Sameach.
Hag Sameach.
Thanks. Hag Sameach. Thanks a ton.